The sirens sliced through the humid Georgia night, blue and red flashes painting the wet asphalt like the pulse of a wounded beast. Dr. Kamari Holt didn't flinch. His hands stayed fixed at 10 and 2, sweat running slow behind the cuff of his Rolex. Inside the back of the black Bentley, 2 silver cases gleamed unmarked, sealed tight, and worth $23 million in narcotics. Not the kind that kill, the kind the government refused to approve, the kind that cured children whose insurance didn't believe in miracles. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." The officer's voice carried that familiar edge. Not fear, not control, but curiosity, the kind that grows teeth. Kamari obeyed, slow, calculated. His tailored suit caught the light like silk armor. "Do you know why we stopped you?" Kamari looked him dead in the eyes. "Because I'm driving success in the wrong color skin." A moment, a silence. The cop's partner chuckled under his breath until his radio crackled. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. No dispatch, no chatter, just static, then nothing. Both officers froze, staring at their dead radios as if the night itself had swallowed their signal. The first officer reached for his belt, uncertainty creeping into his posture. The other one took a step back. Kamari's calm didn't waver. He reached into his jacket, slow as moonlight, and pulled out a sleek, obsidian black card. The kind that opened doors others didn't even know existed. "Call your captain," he said. The cop hesitated. "And tell him what?" "Tell him," Kamari replied, voice low and unbothered. "You just pulled over his biggest donor." In that frozen second, hierarchy reversed itself. The air changed temperature. What had started as a routine stop now carried the weight of a secret the city wasn't ready to confront. And if you think that's where this story ends, stay with me. Because what happens next will flip every assumption upside down. Sometimes, power doesn't come from who carries the badge, but from who paid for it. Keep watching, because before this night is over, Kamari Holt's entire empire will come crashing down. The night didn't move. Even the rain had stopped mid-breath, hanging in the air like it was waiting for orders. The 2 officers stood still, hands near their weapons, eyes flicking between each other, and the silent radios clipped to their chests. The static that had been their safety net gone. Kamari's calm was disarming. He wasn't just composed, he was surgical about it. Every blink measured, every breath controlled. It was the kind of stillness that only came from a man who had survived worse than blue light and suspicion. "Call your captain," he repeated softly. His voice carried authority, not threat, the tone of someone who owned consequences. The older cop, Jenkins, swallowed. "You said, donor?" Kamari nodded once. "Marcus Tanner, chief of police. His daughter Noimos, dying 2 years ago. Lupus complications. The treatment she needed wasn't covered. A small private foundation stepped in." "You remember the name?" The younger officer, Alvarez, frowned. "The Holt Foundation," Kamari smiled, barely. "And now, gentlemen, you understand why I don't like being late." The words hung between them, thick and deliberate. Jenkins' hand dropped from his holster. Alvarez looked at the silent radio again, uncertain. "What's in the trunk, sir?" Kamari's eyes met his. "A better world, but your department calls it contraband." He walked toward the Bentley before either could react, his shoes kissing the wet road. Every step echoed, measured. He opened the trunk and lifted the silver cases to polished containers that looked more like tech, prototypes than drug transport units. Inside, rows of glass vials shimmered under the trunk light, labeled only with numbers and barcodes. No names, no brands, just purity. Alvarez leaned in, whispering, "Those aren't street drugs. That's pharmaceutical grade. Hydrocerebinol," Kamari finished. "A gene therapy agent. Illegal in this country because it didn't pass stage 4 trials. You know why it didn't." Neither officer answered. Because it costs less than a tenth of what the approved version makes for the company sitting in your mayor's pocket. There was no pride in his voice, just exhaustion, the kind that builds from fighting a system too big to name. Jenkins exhaled, glancing down the dark stretch of highway where no headlights approached. You're trafficking medicine. I'm delivering hope, Kamari said. 2 hospitals that stopped receiving shipments 3 months ago. The younger officer's jaw tightened. That's still illegal. Kamari smiled, but there was pain behind it. So was Rosa Parks. A wind gusted across the road, rustling the trees. The radios hissed faintly, trying to wake from their death. Jenkins tapped his, whispered into it. Nothing, only silence. Then, headlights. A black SUV rolled up from the shadows. Tinted windows, engine low and expensive. Jenkins stiffened. Who's that? Kamari didn't answer. The SUV stopped beside them, and the back window slid down. Chief Marcus Tanner's face appeared, half lit by the dashboard glow. The man's expression was unreadable. Relief, fear, shame. Dr. Holt, Tanner said, voice low. You weren't supposed to take this route. Plans changed, Kamari replied. The shipment had to move before midnight. The chief looked at his officers, then back to Kamari. You've put me in a position. Kamari stepped closer, lowering his tone. No, Marcus. I've kept you in one. The 2 men locked eyes, one in uniform, one in control. It wasn't confrontation, it was confession. Tanner nodded slowly. You'll follow me back to the city. Quietly, of course. He turned to his officers. Forget this. Stop. It never happened. But, Sir Alvarez started. But Tanner cut him off. That's an order. The SUV pulled away first, red taillights bleeding into the distance. Kamari closed the trunk, got back into the Bentley, and followed. As the highway curved into darkness, Alvarez whispered, You ever seen something like that? Jenkins shook his head. No, but I think we just met the man who decides what illegal means. The road stretched out like a secret between them all. Kamari's reflection flickered in the glass. A man driving toward power and danger at the same time. His pulse was steady, but his mind was burning. He thought of his mother, the day she died in a public hospital, gasping for a drug that existed but couldn't be prescribed because of regulations. He'd been 24, poor, brilliant, furious. That fury had built the Holt Biogen Institute, a billion-dollar company rooted in innovation and shadow. He'd cured diseases in countries that didn't have the luxury of legality, and tonight was another chapter in the same war. But as the city's skyline came into view, the silver veins of Atlanta glowing in the mist, a single thought pierced through. Someone had leaked the route. Those cops weren't there by accident. He pressed a button on the dash. The secure line buzzed once, then connected. A voice answered. Dr. Holt, tell me who knew about tonight's shipment. Silence. Then, only the board and the warehouse supervisor. Kamari's jaw tightened. Then, one of them is about to lose more than a job. He hung up. The Bentley followed the chief's SUV off the main highway into a private access road behind the downtown medical district. Cameras turned away as they approached, automatic, like obedient servants. The SUV stopped. Tanner stepped out, rain slicking his uniform cap. Kamari, he said quietly, this has to end soon. Too many eyes. Kamari looked past him, toward the glowing hospital rooftop ahead. It ends when the people who profit from sickness learn to fear the cure. Tanner exhaled. You're playing God. Kamari's reply was ice. No, Marcus. I'm just tired of begging him. He walked past the chief toward the hidden elevator. The silver cases rolled behind him on a dolly. As the doors closed, he caught Tanner's reflection in the steel, haunted, conflicted, small. The elevator began to descend, but not up to the hospital floors. Down, Deep underground, the light dimmed. The hum of machines grew louder. And beneath the city, Kamari's true empire waited, a secret lab where legality and salvation were enemies. But someone else was already there, watching, waiting, and before dawn, Kamari Holt would discover that silence, the one thing he controlled, could be used against him. If you think Kamari is untouchable, stay with me. Because the betrayal that's coming doesn't start from the streets, it starts from his boardroom. The lab smelled like ozone and antiseptic, the kind of clean that tries too hard to hide secrets. Under halogen lights, the silver cases lay open on stainless steel tables, like small altars, rows of vials, catching the light and multiplying it into 1,000 tiny promises. Kamari moved among them with a surgeon's focus, checking labels with a thumbprint scanner and a practiced reverence. He touched nothing without scanning, without a code. Ritual met technology in the subterranean quiet. Above, the city breathed in a different rhythm. Traffic hummed and people slept. Below, monitors scrolled through lines of data that meant lives. He watched a live feed of clinics in 3 neighborhoods where patients had started to recover within days of the first doses. A child's fever dropping, an old woman's cough easing, a man's tremors slowing small miracles that bureaucrats called anomalies. A knock sounded at the lab door, soft as a conscience. Kamari didn't start. He knew every sound this place made. He turned to find Layla Cho, Koo, and the only board member who'd ever argued with him about ethics and optics. She looked exhausted in a way money couldn't fix, sleepless with the grief of someone who'd watched promises fail and then be patched together by midnight smuggling runs. "You shouldn't be down here this late," she said. Her voice had the steadiness of someone who could still manage a company when markets turned savage. "Neither should you," Kamari answered. "We're under different lights tonight." She crossed to a terminal and scrolled through a manifest. Someone flagged the route. 2 cars. A patrol. You should have had a second team sweep the access roads. Kamari's jaw set. Who else knew? Warehouse supervisor, Cale Ross. Board only. Marcus, you told me you encrypted the transport logs. She tapped the screen. Rows of movement data blinked back. Somebody spoofed them, made it look like a routine municipal convoy. That single word, spoofed, tasted like betrayal. For 2 beats, neither spoke. In the other world, the 2 cops who'd watched the radios die were driving back to the precinct on a wet pulse of adrenaline. Alvarez was the first to break the quiet in the cruiser. He kept glancing at the radio as if it were a sleeping animal. Why would the radio go out? He asked, more to the night than to Jenkins. Jenkins kept his hands on the wheel, fingers white. He'd been a cop long enough to know when something didn't add up, because someone wanted it to. Who? He didn't want to say the name, but the city whispered it anyway. Tanner, the chief, the man whose charity plaques had the cornerstones of the police academy named after him. Melina had seen Tanner at a fundraiser last fall, shaking hands with politicians who smiled like fossils. Alvarez thought of the chief's face in the SUV window, the way he'd watched Kamari with a look that was half apology and half calculation. Back underground, Layla's mouth tightened. Cale is loyal but cornered. Men talk. Her eyes slid to a secured camera feed, showing the loading bay, a looped hour of footage that smeared like a bad dream. We need to check his private devices. If he's gone, call a trace. Kamari's mind did the math in quiet increments. Who had access to manifests, to secure routes, and, most deadly, to the governor's circle that had been cozy with farmer donors? He thought of the silver card he'd flashed on the highway, of lines of influence threaded through the city like ligatures. Influence could bind people to silence, but it could also snap. At the precinct, Alvarez scrolled through his phone, sweating. "I pulled up the chief's donor list, like you said." He confessed to Jenkins, who'd ordered him to be careful but to follow the itch. Holt Foundation's on top, Grants, donations, you name it. There's a list of payouts. Jenkins didn't speak. Duty sat on his chest like a weight. He understood loyalty the way men who lived by oaths do. It had edges, and it bled. "We need to file a report," he said finally. "Document the stop. Call dispatch again from the station. Get a supervisor to sign off." Alvarez's fingers hesitated. "If this goes up the chain, we might be the ones smudged." He meant the smear of being labeled as men who tampered with a case involving influential donors. He meant careers and reputations and mortgages. He also meant he was tired of taking punches for other people's safety nets. Below, Layla pulled up a different feed, an internal messages log. The little timestamps blinked like the seconds in a bomb. "There," she said. A message flashed from Cale to an unknown number. "Route confirmed. To patrol presence flagged. Proceed at 23:12. The message carried the greasy weight of inevitability. Kamari felt it like a pulse under his skin. "Cale, he's been with us 6 years, Layla said. "He took care of logistics when we expanded to clinics. He's from the South Side. He believed in this. He believed in you." Her voice broke at the word believed. "But he's been fighting gambling debt," and Kamari closed his eyes. He thought of every person who'd leaned on him for salvation and found themselves in a ledger of favors and mistakes. Mercy had a price. Sometimes it was a life. At the precinct, Alvarez ran the message through a search and found something else. A blurred photo of the Bentley being trailed. A grainy frame, time-stamped an hour before the stop. On the back of the photo, a note. "Make sure he gets where he's supposed to. Don't let him spill it." The handwriting was neat and professional, not like someone scribbling in a rush. "Who would send that?" Alvarez whispered. "Who's watching him this closely?" The answer threaded through both places at once. Someone with access, someone who could order a radio to die and place cameras on a private access road. Someone who could make cops forget the rules of their own trade. Kamari moved from the lab to a locker and extracted a photograph of his mother, the edges soft from being held too often. He pressed it to his chest and let a memory pull him back to a hospital room where a doctor had delivered a verdict wrapped in insurance codes. His mother's fingers had been small and cold and full of apologies she'd never need to say. He'd promised her a different future. That promise had turned into the silver cases. Layla's hand hovered over a file labeled Board Audit Confidential. She opened it and found signatures where trust had been traded. Seed investors who'd funneled funds through shell companies. A liaison who sat on a health committee. A compliance officer with a way of looking away. Names were falling like dominoes. The board wasn't a wall, it was a house of cards. At the precinct, Jenkins felt the room tilt. He had a partner who wanted to do the right thing, a chief who wanted to bury it, and a city that wouldn't forgive mistakes. The photo in Alvarez's hand pulsed under the fluorescent light, like a heartbeat. He thought of the radio silence again, not dead, but muzzled. Someone had ordered quiet. Someone had power. The lab doors hissed open, and a junior tech rushed in with a tablet, face pale as linen. "Dr. Holt, you need to see this." Kamari looked up. The screen showed a live stream, not from his cameras, but from an external source. An angle he didn't recognize, capturing his loading bay, and at the corner of the frame a small watermark. "Watcher." On the feed, the silver cases sat opened. A man in a hooded jacket stood near them, his face obscured. He raised a camera and the lens caught one of the vials and then panned to a laptop on a cart. The laptop screen displayed a document. Holt Foundation Beneficiaries List. Names scrolled by. And then the camera zoomed in, steady and deliberate, until the text blurred into a single line, highlighted in red. "Confidential board use only." The hooded figure typed as he filmed. His fingers were long and precise. He paused, looked straight at the camera as if into a mirror. and the feed cut. Somewhere in the city, on the highway, in the boardroom, and in the thin blue light of the precinct, a single enemy smiled without showing his face. Kamari's mouth went dry. Layla's hand found the back of a chair until her knuckles whitened. Jenkins pulled out his notebook and wrote one word in the margin: Tanner. Alvarez looked at the timestamp on the photo and then at his partner. "This isn't a random stop," he said. "This is a message." Kamari's lab lights hummed. The silver vials sat like sleeping ghosts. And above ground, somewhere between loyalty and survival, someone had just decided to start a war by turning every radio in the city silent. The feed flickered back. The hooded figure's camera blinked alive one last time. He held up a card, not black this time, but white, and stamped with a crest Kamari had seen at a gala, the governor's private insignia. The camera zoomed on the crest, then the screen went to static. The message was clear. The Watchers had a name. The Watchers had friends in rooms Kamari had never wanted to enter, and they had the power to make the city listen or not. The precinct never really slept. Even at 2 a.m., the fluorescents buzzed, computers hummed, and coffee steamed like nervous breath. Jenkins and Alvarez sat in interview room 3, a space that smelled of bleach and stale fear. They weren't interrogating anyone. They were hiding from the weight of what they'd seen. The digital clock ticked toward to 15. Jenkins rubbed his temples. Alvarez paced, phone in hand, scrolling the donor records again, whispering names as if reading a prayer backward. Every third name was a politician, every fifth a judge, and always, in elegant font, the Holt Foundation. "Tell me again," Alvarez said, "why the hell a biotech CEO is bankrolling half the city and running medicine in suitcases?" Jenkins didn't answer. He was staring at the reflection in the two-way glass, the ghostly outline of a man in uniform questioning his own badge. "Because someone's got to keep the machine oiled," he muttered. "And we just saw the guy who built the machine." A knock. Sergeant Whitfield poked his head in, all heavy shoulders and clipped tone. "Chief wants a word, now." The word chief made Alvarez's pulse spike. Jenkins nodded, playing casual. "We'll be right there." Whitfield lingered. "He's not in his office," he said. "Meet him downstairs, in the garage." The two men exchanged a glance. The garage, the cameras down there, had been under maintenance for weeks. When Whitfield left, Alvarez whispered, "You think he knows we were digging?" Jenkins shrugged on his jacket. "He always knows. Question is, what he wants to bury." They walked the corridor in silence. Every fluorescent light seemed to flicker as they passed, each hum a heartbeat. By the time the elevator doors opened to the underground level, the air felt different, colder, heavier, thick with the smell of motor oil and exhaust. Chief Tanner waited near his black SUV, coat collar turned up, eyes hidden behind city-issue fatigue. He wasn't smiling. "Evening, gentlemen," he said. "Rough shift." Alvarez forced a nod. "Long night, sir. Sit tight." Tanner gestured toward the car. "Let's talk somewhere private." Jenkins hesitated. "We can talk here, Chief." Tanner's jaw tightened. "Inside. Now." The tone wasn't a request. They got in, the chief behind the wheel, Jenkins and Alvarez in back. The SUV rolled out of the garage, tires whispering against concrete. For a long stretch, nobody spoke. Downtown lights smeared across the windows as they hit the street. Finally, Tanner said, "I hear you two filed a preliminary report about a traffic stop earlier tonight." Alvarez glanced at Jenkins. "We logged the stop." "Yes, sir." "That report's going to disappear," Tanner said flatly. "You'll get an email from records saying the case ID was duplicated. You'll sign off, and that's the end of it." Jenkins's hands clenched. "Chief, with respect, a report disappearing isn't procedure. Neither is pulling over a man who keeps half this department funded." Tanner's Voice carried fatigue and warning in equal measure. You think I like it? You think I sleep easy knowing what lines we crossed? But I can't fix the system by getting us all killed in it. Sir, we just want to understand, Alvarez said quietly. Who is he, really? Tanner's laugh was dry. He's the reason your kids get health insurance, Alvarez. He's the reason this precinct didn't close when the budget cuts came. He's a necessary devil. Then why did you come out there yourself? Jenkins asked. You looked scared. The SUV slowed at a red light. Tanner didn't answer right away. He stared at the glow painting his hands. Because when radios go dead in this city, it means somebody higher than me wants silence. And tonight wasn't my call. The light turned green. They drove on. A few blocks later, Tanner pulled into a dim parking lot behind a shuttered diner. He cut the engine, but the headlights stayed on, carving long shadows across the wet asphalt. I'm telling you both this once, he said. Forget Holt. Forget what you think you saw. The man isn't what you can write down on paper. Chief Jenkins started, but the chief held up a hand. You file that report. The state audit team will descend. The press will follow, and Holt will pull every dollar out of the city within a week. Hospitals close. Clinics die. People like your mother, Jenkins, won't have a bed to die in. That's what your righteousness buys. The words hit like a slap. Jenkins's throat tightened. He hadn't told anyone about his mother. Tanner reached into his coat pocket and slid a folded envelope across the seat. This is a transfer request. Different district. You'll sign, you'll take a few weeks off, and you'll forget. That's an order. Alvarez stared at the envelope like it was a loaded gun. And if we don't, the chief's eyes met his in the mirror. Then silence won't be the only thing that dies. He started the engine again. But before he could pull out, another car coasted into the lot, a dark sedan, windows tinted. It stopped behind them, blocking the exit. Tanner's jaw went rigid. Stay in the car, he said, and stepped out. Two men approached from the sedan. No uniforms, no badges. Their suits looked too clean for police. Alvarez could barely see their faces through the drizzle, but he caught the glint of earpieces. One of them handed Tanner a small package flat, wrapped in plastic. Tanner opened it, frowned, then nodded once. The man leaned in and whispered something that made the chief's shoulders drop, as if the air had been punched from him. When Tanner returned, his face was colorless. You two are done for tonight, he said, voice tight. Go home, sleep. What was that? Jenkins demanded. Evidence chain. Nothing for you. Tanner looked away. They're taking over the case. Who are they? Tanner didn't answer. He stepped back, and the sedan pulled away, vanishing into the rain. Back in the SUV, Alvarez whispered, We're in something we don't understand, man. Jenkins stared through the windshield, rain streaking down the glass like static. No, he said. We understand it. We just finally see it. When they got back to the precinct, the building looked the same, but everything inside had shifted. The hallways felt narrower, the walls thicker. On Jenkins's desk sat a new memo stamped Confidential Internal Review. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet with two sentences. Cease inquiry into incident number 47 to 211. Subject classified under Municipal Security Act. No signature, no seal. Alvarez leaned over his shoulder. They buried it before we even got back. Jenkins folded the memo carefully. Then we make our own record. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket, the one he'd slipped into the patrol car data port during the stop. A habit he'd picked up after too many cover-ups. Everything's on here, he said. Dashcam, radio logs, timestamps. Alvarez exhaled. You're gonna leak it? Not yet. But if I vanish, you know where to send it. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. In another part of town, beneath layers of steel and secrecy, Kamari Holt looked up from a monitor showing police dispatch feeds flickering in and out of static. A faint smile touched his mouth, the kind of smile that knows too much. He whispered, almost tenderly, "Don't dig, officers. You'll find the rot runs both ways. Stay with me, B, 'cause what Jenkins and Alvarez do next will decide who the city believes, the badge, or the man who owns it." The rain hadn't stopped by dawn. It just learned to whisper. It threaded across the precinct windows like static on glass. Jenkins sat at his desk with a cold cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the small flash drive beside his badge. The drive looked harmless, almost ordinary, but it carried enough truth to crush reputations and maybe a city. Alvarez arrived a few minutes late, uniform rumpled, eyes hollow. He dropped a brown paper bag on the desk, 2 egg sandwiches, 2 headaches postponed. "You sleep?" he asked. Jenkins shook his head, didn't even try. Alvarez nodded, sat, and unwrapped the sandwich without appetite. "I kept thinking about what the chief said. Silence won't be the only thing that dies. What does that even mean, man?" "It means we're not supposed to ask," Jenkins said quietly. "And that's exactly why we have to." He opened his laptop and inserted the flash drive. The screen blinked, then filled with the patrol car footage, the highway, the blue-red strobes, Holt stepping out of the Bentley. Even on video, the man radiated calm, the kind that didn't flinch around authority. It created it. Alvarez leaned forward. "Look there." When the radios go dead, the waveform on the audio feed flattened to silence. Jenkins froze the frame. The timestamp read 23 hours, 12 minutes, and 47 seconds. "Same minute the chief texted us to stand by," Jenkins said. "You see the link?" Alvarez's throat tightened. "You think Tanner planned it?" "I think someone told him to clean it up," Jenkins replied. "And if that's true, this isn't about one donor. It's about the chain of favors that keeps the lights on." The realization hung heavy. Around them, the precinct moved in ordinary rhythm, phones ringing, typewriters clacking, but inside that bubble of lamplight, everything felt slowed, deliberate, dangerous. Jenkins reached for a notepad. "We need a copy stored somewhere outside department servers." Alvarez frowned. "You want to leak it?" "I want insurance," Jenkins said. "If something happens to us, the story doesn't vanish." They drove across town to a quiet cafe that opened early for night shift workers. It smelled of burnt espresso and resignation. Jenkins ordered black coffee. Alvarez took tea he wouldn't drink. In the far booth, Jenkins slid the flash drive into his jacket pocket. "We can upload to the city archive," Alvarez suggested. "Make it look routine data, sync from patrol." "To traceable," Jenkins said. "We need off-grid." He took out a folded business card. "Harper Quinn, investigative journalist, Atlanta Ledger." A number scribbled on the back. "She's been chasing the Holt Foundation for months. Keeps asking about donations, construction bids, missing grants." Alvarez's eyebrows rose. "You trust her?" "I trust her to care about the story more than her safety," Jenkins said. "Sometimes that's the same thing." He texted a single line. "Need to talk. Truth's on a drive." The reply came fast. "Meet me after sunset. No uniforms." Alvarez exhaled. "We're really doing this." Jenkins looked out the window. A street sweeper passed, spraying light into puddles. "We already did." By afternoon, the precinct buzzed with unusual calm to calm. The chief hadn't shown since dawn. Word was he'd been called to City Hall. The silence around his absence felt orchestrated. Whitfield stopped by Jenkins's desk, forced a grin. "Heard you two were out early. You working another case?" "Just paperwork," Jenkins said. Whitfield tapped the badge on Jenkins's chest. "Keep your nose clean, old man. Promotions come to the quiet ones." When he walked off, Alvarez muttered, "That was a warning." "Yeah," Jenkins said. "Polite one." They met Harper Quinn at dusk in a park that overlooked the freeway. The traffic below moved like liquid neon, a reminder that the city never truly stopped. Harper was tall, sharp-eyed, hair tucked into a messy bun that looked unintentional but wasn't. She wore a raincoat and carried an old-fashioned notebook paper, not digital. "You came armed with analog," Jenkins said. "Paper doesn't crash," she replied. "You said you had proof." Jenkins handed her the drive. "Everything from last night. Video, radio logs, timestamps. You'll see the chief arrive. The radios go silent. The order to stand down." Harper turned the small device over in her palm like a coin of fate. "If this is real, it's bigger than the department. It's politics, medicine, money. That's why we're here," Jenkins said. "You tell stories. We tell truths people bury." She studied him. "You realize what happens when this hits daylight? You won't wear that badge again." Jenkins's face didn't change. "A badge that needs silence to survive isn't worth the metal." Harper nodded, pocketed the drive. "I'll verify the data before I publish. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours, assume it's suppressed." "Suppressed by who?" Alvarez asked. She gave a half smile. "That's the question I plan to answer." As she walked away, the wind picked up, tugging at the pages of her notebook until they flapped like restless wings. Jenkins watched her silhouette disappear into the spill of streetlight. He felt equal parts relief and dread. Back in the cruiser, the radio crackled to life for the first time since the incident. A dispatch tone, then a voice they didn't recognize. "Unit 712, report to Central Records." Alvarez frowned. "That's us." Jenkins stared at the speaker. "No, our unit ID was changed this morning." The radio hissed once, then died again. They exchanged a look that needed no words. Someone was listening. Jenkins started the engine. "We don't go back tonight." "Then where?" "Somewhere public. Somewhere bright." They drove through the city's arteries, passing billboards that glowed with the Holt Foundation's logo blue letters, promising innovation for life. Each sign felt like an eye watching. At a red light, Alvarez said softly, "You ever think maybe Holt started with good intentions?" "Maybe," Jenkins said, "but good intentions don't excuse ghosts." He turned left toward Midtown, where street musicians filled the corners and light pooled under cafe awnings. For a moment, they could almost pretend it was an ordinary shift. Then Jenkins's phone buzzed a new message from an unknown number. He opened it. A photo filled the screen. Harper, standing near the park bench where they'd met. Behind her, a car door open, a blur of movement. The caption read, "Nice drive." Alvarez saw his face drain of color. "What is it?" "They know," Jenkins whispered. He deleted the image, but the unease stayed. They parked near the waterfront, engine off, city lights trembling on the river. Alvarez leaned back, eyes closed. "We could still walk away," he said. "Pretend the flash drive never existed." Jenkins watched the reflection of the skyline ripple across the water. "And live knowing we helped silence a city." "No." Alvarez rubbed his temples. "Then we need a plan B." Jenkins's gaze shifted to the far bank where the governor's mansion lights burned steady against the dark. "We'll find one," he said. "But first, we make copies." He pulled another drive from his Cota backup. "Insurance for the insurance." Alvarez laughed quietly, the sound edged with fear. "You think ahead too much. Years on the force teach you that survival's just another form of paperwork," Jenkins said. They sat in silence, two men on the edge of principle and ruin, while the city whispered around them. Far below, in an office no one could access without clearance, a security feed flickered. Two officers in a parked car by the river. A digital voice noted the coordinates. A gloved hand pressed record. Somewhere behind that feed, someone murmured, "They've chosen their side." And in the dark, the silence began again. Stay with me, because once truth starts moving, it doesn't stop until someone pays the price. The morning after the meeting at the park, the city woke like nothing had shifted. Coffee shops humming, stock tickers crawling, ambulances whining through traffic. But beneath that surface, wires carried whispers. At 7:12 a.m., a private alert tripped in Kamari Holt's secure network. Unauthorized file activity. Police dashcam feed extracted. The system flagged an external drive ID and traced its movement through a public Wi-Fi node near Piedmont Park. The name on the signal, Harper Quinn Kamari, stood in his penthouse office, high above the skyline, hands in his pockets, eyes cold. He didn't curse or shout. He just listened to the faint hum of the city below, as if it were an organism trying to warn him of infection. Behind him, the glass walls reflected an empire. The biotech logos, the framed awards, the sterile beauty of success. But beneath that polish was a current of tension, the feeling of control slipping one heartbeat at a time. Layla entered quietly, tablet in hand. We confirmed it. Harper Quinn met with the two officers, Jenkins and Alvarez. The journalists now a variable. Kamari's expression didn't change. A variable can be managed. A principle cannot. Which are they? Jenkins is the moral spine. Alvarez follows the heart. Quincy's the fuse. He turned from the window. Then we need water before fire. Layla hesitated. You want me to reach out to her? No, I'll do it. Kamari crossed the room to his desk, where an antique fountain pen sat beside a folded letterhead embossed with the Holt Foundation crest. He wrote by hand, ink slow and deliberate. Ms. Quinn, I believe truth deserves context. Join me for breakfast. 1 hour. Holt Tower, 52nd floor. He signed it KH, then looked at Layla. Deliver it through channels she trusts. It must look like transparency, not fear. Down in the city, Harper was already running late for a meeting she hadn't planned on having. The note had arrived through a courier she recognized from past interviews. Neutral, courteous, impossible to trace. Her instincts screamed caution, but her curiosity, her oldest addictual one. By the time she reached Holt Tower, security had already cleared her. The elevator ascended in silence, glass walls showing the skyline stretching into fog. When the doors opened, Kamari stood by the window, the morning sun carving his profile into sculpture. Ms. Quinn, he said smoothly, you're earlier than I expected. I appreciate punctual people. She smiled, wary. I figured a man accused of hiding too much would value time. He gestured to the table. 2 plates, untouched breakfast, a carafe of coffee that steamed between them like a peace offering. Then let's not waste any. She sat opposite him. You know why I'm here? Of course, he said. Because you believe in stories that make sense. But truth doesn't live in headlines. It lives in what people are too afraid to say out loud. She studied him. And what are you afraid of, Dr. Holt? He met her gaze without flinching. That good intentions can rot into the same disease they tried to cure. She tilted her head. You know there's a recording. Video, audio, timestamps. The world will see it. I know, he said. And when they do, the question won't be whether I broke a little bee, whether the law was already broken before I ever touched it. For a heartbeat, something human flickered in his eyes. Not guilt memory. Do you really believe that justifies everything? She asked. I believe someone has to do the work. Polite people refuse to touch, Kamari replied. The medicine in those cases was never about profit. It was about time. People are dying while committees debate their survival. Harper leaned back. Then why smuggle it like contraband? Because the system criminalized urgency. She almost smiled. That's a good quote. Sounds rehearsed. Kamari's lips curved faintly. Everything worth saying usually is. Silence stretched between them. brittle but alive. Then Harper leaned forward. If you didn't orchestrate the radio blackout, who did? Kamari's gaze sharpened. Someone higher than the chief. Someone with more to lose than I do. Ask your editors how much advertising revenue they get from the governor's health initiative. Her breath hitched. You're suggesting the governor? I'm not suggesting anything, Kamari interrupted softly. I'm reminding you that silence has owners. She studied him, searching for cracks. If you're right, you could help me prove it. I already am, he said. By letting you walk out of here. He stood. The conversation was over. Meanwhile, across town, Jenkins sat in his unmarked sedan, watching the live feed from his phone. Harper's tracking app blinked a green dot inside Holt Tower. She's in, Alvarez murmured. Think she'll make it out? She will, Jenkins said, though his tone betrayed doubt. He doesn't need bodies. He needs narratives. Alvarez rubbed his face. I keep thinking maybe he's not the villain here. Maybe he's the only one telling the truth. Jenkins glanced at him. You starting to believe the sermons? I'm saying the city runs on compromises, man. Maybe Holt's just honest about his. Jenkins sighed. Maybe, but when power learns how to justify itself, that's when we lose the map. The phone buzzed an encrypted call. Jenkins answered. No voice, just a digital distortion and a phrase repeated twice. Watcher sees all. He hung up. We've been tagged. Alvarez straightened. You mean our phones? Our lives? They drove off, merging into traffic. The sense of being followed now tangible. In the rearview mirror, a black SUV held steady to cars behind. Jenkins muttered, they're not even pretending anymore. Alvarez reached for the glove box, pulled out a burner phone. Time to disappear. Not yet, Jenkins said. Time to finish what we started. He opened the burner and texted Harper. If you get out, don't go home. They're watching everything. No reply came. Back in Holt Tower, Harper stepped into the elevator, clutching her notebook. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls of face, caught between triumph and fear. As the elevator descended, the screen panel flickered once, then filled with static. A voice came through the speaker, calm, synthetic. Ms. Quinn, please exit on floor 41. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't pressed that floor. The elevator stopped. The doors slid open. The hallway was empty, dim. Only a single light at the far end. She stepped out, hesitated, then turned back. The doors had already closed. Down the hall, a figure stood waiting. Layla, tablet in hand. You weren't supposed to see all this yet, Layla said quietly. Harper tightened her grip on the notebook. Then show me why. Layla's eyes softened. Because sometimes the truth isn't ready for daylight. It burns before it heals. Outside, Jenkins's phone buzzed again. Harper's green dot had vanished from the tracker. Alvarez whispered, she's gone. Jenkins stared at the screen. The city reflected in his eyes like shattered glass. No, he said. She's just somewhere the signal can't breathe. He pocketed the phone, started the engine, and merged into the stream of cars that moved through Atlanta like blood through arteries. Somewhere above them, in Holt Tower's glass veins, the line between savior and sinner blurred beyond recognition, and the silence, that perfect, engineered silence, began to hum again. Stay with me, because the next move will decide who controls the truth, and who becomes its casualty. The newsroom of the Atlanta Ledger was never quiet, but this morning its noise carried unease instead of energy. Harper Quinn's desk lamp still burned, though she hadn't been seen since dawn. Her editor, Martin Keene, stood at her workstation, staring at the empty coffee mug and the small recorder she always left running. It still blinked red, capturing the hum of the room as if waiting for her voice. He pressed stop. The final seconds played back. Footsteps, the sound of an elevator door. then a soft mechanical tone followed by silence. Across town, Jenkins and Alvarez sat in a borrowed office at a friend's auto shop, neutral ground, out of sight. The smell of oil and metal mixed with the raw tension between them. The laptop on the table showed a blank feed where Harper's tracker used to be. "She's been off the grid for 8 hours, Alvarez said. Jenkins leaned forward, elbows on knees. "She's alive. Someone wants her quiet, not gone." "Same thing," Alvarez muttered. Different headline. Jenkins opened a small notebook filled with codes, names, arrows connecting power lines between corporations, city offices, hospitals. "Look at this. Every contract that holds foundation funds eventually loops back to a state committee chaired by Governor Riley's staff. Follow the money and you hit policy." Alvarez shook his head. "That's politics. We're cops. We don't play in that field." "Maybe that's been the problem all along," Jenkins said. "We thought the badge was separate from the building it's nailed to." Outside, the sound of a wrench dropping made them flinch. A mechanic poked his head in, apologized, and left. When the door closed, Jenkins lowered his voice. "We need to move the data again. Somewhere public, but safe." Alvarez frowned. "We gave the only copy to Harper." Jenkins slid a second drive across the table. "I never said I trusted just one parachute." The younger officer gave a tight laugh. "You think ahead too much. Survival habit." He plugged the drive into the laptop. On the screen appeared encrypted folders, video logs, emails, but also something new, a file timestamped less than an hour ago. Jenkins hadn't added it. "What's that?" Alvarez asked. Jenkins clicked. A video opened. Harper sitting in a dim office, her face tired but steady. "If you're seeing this," she said, "it means I'm being held until negotiations finish. They want a statement retracting the story. They offered me access to contextual material, that's their phrase so. The narrative can be corrected." She paused. "They don't understand that context is the story." Static cut the feed, then resumed with her final words. "The truth will breathe if you keep it moving." Then the screen went black. Alvarez exhaled. "She's alive. She's telling us to run it." Jenkins stared at the dark screen. "And she's telling us she's being used." He closed the laptop. "We move tonight." Inside Holt Tower, Layla watched the same feed from a control room that didn't officially exist. Harper sat in an adjoining conference suite, guarded by courtesy and catered breakfast. Kamari entered quietly, carrying a folder. "I told you this wasn't confinement," he said. "You're safe here." Harper met his eyes. "Safety isn't silence." He set the folder down. Inside were audit reports, letters between the governor's office and multiple hospitals, evidence of funds redirected under public health initiatives. "You wanted truth," he said. "Here's what you can print. It shows how policy strangled every low-income clinic in the South District. What you won't find is my name. I kept the lights on when their budgets died." Harper read the papers, jaw tightening. "You're buying redemption with transparency." "I'm buying time," Kamari said. "When this goes public, they'll burn me to save themselves. But maybe the fire will show where the smoke came from." "You're still controlling the story." "I'm giving it a direction," he replied. "Without one truth gets buried under outrage." He walked to the window. "There's a conference tonight at City Hall. Governor Riley will announce a new ethics initiative. My foundation's name will be on the banner." "That's where this ends." Harper frowned. "You're inviting the collapse. I'm inviting an ending I can live with." Evening bled into the city like ink. Jenkins and Alvarez parked 2 blocks from City Hall amid protesters gathering for the governor's announcement. Homemade signs waved in the drizzle-sun, demanding transparency, others thanking the Holt Foundation for its donations. The contradiction was the city itself, grateful and suspicious, angry and dependent. From the stage steps, cameras glinted like eyes. Jenkins adjusted his cap low over his face. "We drop the file when the speech starts," he said. "Every network will be streaming." Alvarez nodded, nervous. "You sure about this?" "Truth's only dangerous until it's shared," Jenkins said. Inside the hall, marble floors reflected chandeliers and ambition. Harper, flanked by Layla, watched the crowd from a balcony. Kamari approached in a tailored suit darker than the storm outside. "Everything ready?" he asked. Layla nodded. "If the leak goes live, servers reroute to a public archive. You can't erase it afterward." "That's the point," Kamari said. He looked at Harper. "You still have your pen." She lifted it. "Always." Down on the plaza, the governor took the podium, smiling for the cameras. "Tonight, we celebrate partnership," he began. "Private innovation and public service working hand in hand." The words echoed through speakers. They sounded noble, practiced. Jenkins, standing among the crowd, slid his phone from his pocket and hit send. The file transferred to a cloud server linked to multiple journalists' inboxes. A progress bar crawled. Halfway above them, in the control room, red alerts began to flash. Layla stared at the screen. "He's doing it." Kamari didn't move. "Let it finish." Alvarez glanced at Jenkins's phone. 87%, 90. Then the feed froze. The signal jammed. Jenkins cursed under his breath. They cut the bandwidth. Alvarez pulled a small drive from his pocket, the mirror copy. Plan B. Jenkins nodded. Manual delivery. They pushed through the crowd toward a media van parked near the edge of the square. Security eyes followed, uncertain. On the balcony, Harper watched the same motion unfold below. "You planned this," she whispered. Kamari didn't deny it. "You wanted truth. You'll have it. But understand, when the light hits, it won't stop at me. It'll burn everyone standing too close." A tremor of power rolled through the plaza as the jammed networks suddenly came alive again. Phones buzzed, screens lit, and the governor's teleprompter flickered before freezing on one unscripted sentence. "Data breach detected. Source: Municipal Security Office." Gasps spread through the crowd. Reporters shouted questions. The governor looked toward Kamari, confusion flaring into fear. Jenkins's upload resumed 100%. The truth, raw and digital, sprinted across the networks like lightning. Harper's phone buzzed with a notification. "File received. Holt Foundation, Internal Communications." She looked at Kamari. "You knew it would end this way." He smiled, tired. "Endings are just truths. We stop fighting." Outside, sirens rose not of arrest, but of awakening. The sound rolled through the city, echoing off glass and steel, filling every radio that had once gone silent. And for the first time in a long time, Atlanta was listening. Stay with me, because when truth finally speaks, the hardest question isn't who told it, it's who's willing to hear. The plaza didn't explode in chaos, imploded into realization. Screens flickered as the governor's speech dissolved into static, replaced by rolling documents, funding transfers, donor ledgers, internal memos. The crowd's cheers fell into murmurs. The air thickened with disbelief. Jenkins stood still in the middle of it, hand still holding the phone that had set the truth free. He half expected sirens to turn toward him, a hand to grab his shoulder. Instead, he watched the faces around him, citizens, reading the names of people they'd voted for, the hospitals that had gone dark for profit, the charities that weren't charities at all. Beside him, Alvarez whispered, "You just broke the city." "No," Jenkins said quietly. "I just gave it back its voice." Up on the balcony, Harper's phone vibrated non-stop. Messages, alerts, confirmations. Every outlet was already reposting the data. She turned to Kamari. "It's everywhere." Kamari's face was unreadable. "Good." Layla stood at the far console, headset pressed to her ear. Governor's office has gone dark. Internal comes severed. They're isolating systems. Kamari exhaled, the sound like relief and exhaustion colliding. Then the silence belongs to me again. Below, the governor tried to speak, to reclaim control, but the crowd wasn't listening. Reporters swarmed the stage, their microphones like daggers. A chant started, low and angry. Who knew? Who knew? Harper watched the scene and felt both triumph and dread. This will destroy you, she said softly. Kamari's gaze drifted over the city skyline. You can't destroy a ghost. You can only prove it existed. By midnight, Atlanta was awake in ways it hadn't been in decades. Television anchors stumbled through breaking coverage. Commentators whispered words like corruption, biotech influence, state collusion. On social media, Kamari Holt's name trended worldwide. In the quiet backroom of a diner far from downtown, Jenkins and Alvarez sat in a booth, facing each other. The waitress didn't recognize them from the viral clips yet. You realize, Alvarez said, we're the story now. Jenkins stared at the window's reflection. No, we're just the proof that it was true. His phone buzzed an encrypted message. It wasn't from Harper. It was from Layla Cho. He's leaving the tower. He's heading somewhere no one can follow. Kamari Jenkins murmured. Alvarez frowned. You gonna stop him? Jenkins shook his head. No, I'm gonna make sure he gets to say the part nobody else will. He stood, left cash on the table, and walked out into the cool dawn. The city felt heavier the next day, as if the weight of new knowledge had settled over it. Police headquarters overflowed with press. The governor's convoy disappeared into private gates, and the Holt Foundation's doors stood open but empty, security gone, staff vanished. In the middle of that stillness, Harper sat in a small downtown cafe with her laptop, typing the article that would define her career. The title hovered in the document header, The Silence We Paid For. Her hands shook as she typed. Each paragraph peeled back a layer of deception. Government contracts, pharmaceutical lobbying, charitable facades. But when she reached the section about Kamari Holt himself, her fingers paused. The footage showed him calm, articulate, purposeful. Not evil, not innocent, human, she wrote. He built an empire between justice and defiance. He gave medicine to those the law forgot and demanded silence as the price. The city condemned him for breaking its rules. But perhaps the greater sin was needing him in the first place. She stopped, reread the line, and whispered, That's the truth. Across town, Jenkins drove toward the outskirts an industrial area once owned by the Foundation. He'd followed the signal Layla sent. A warehouse near the river, lights still burning though no one should be there. Inside, Kamari stood alone among stacks of crates and darkened screens. The hum of servers echoed like heartbeats. When he heard footsteps, he didn't turn. I thought you'd come sooner, he said. Jenkins stepped into the light. You planning to run? Kamari smiled faintly. No, men like me don't run. We fade. You could have stayed quiet, Jenkins said. Let the governor take the fall, and watch them rebuild the same system under another name. Kamara's eyes flickered with tired fire. No, the truth needed a villain they could point to, someone they couldn't erase. Jenkins folded his arms. So you volunteered. I built the noise. I can carry the blame. He looked around the warehouse. These walls used to make miracles. Now there'll be evidence. Jenkins studied him. You did the right thing the wrong way. Kamari chuckled. Or maybe the wrong thing for the right reason. A long silence passed between them, the kind that carried respect, not forgiveness. Then Kamari said quietly, Promise me one thing, Officer Jenkins. What's that? When they come for me, make sure they remember what I gave, not just what I took. At dawn, he surrendered himself at the courthouse steps. Cameras swarmed, reporters shouted questions, but But Kamari said nothing. He walked through the chaos with calm dignity, flanked by silent guards. Harper was there, notebook in hand. Their eyes met for a second, hers full of questions, his full of answers no words could hold. She whispered to herself, "You made them listen." He inclined his head, as if to say, "Now make them understand." Weeks passed. Atlanta lived in the echo of its own awakening. The governor resigned under health reasons. The chief of police disappeared into a retirement that felt more like exile. New committees formed, new speeches promised, renewed accountability. But in the quiet corners, the clinics that reopened, the families who received treatment they'd never dreamed possible, the whispers carried a different name. Halt. Harper's expos hit global headlines. She became the voice of a movement she hadn't intended to lead. But in interviews, she always repeated one line. He didn't break the system. He revealed it. In a low-security detention facility on the city's edge, Kamari spent his mornings reading letters from strangers' patients, nurses, students. Some cursed him. Most thanked him. None ignored him. Layla visited once a week, bringing updates. "The Foundation's assets are being redirected into a public trust," she said one morning. "Independent oversight. No politics." Kamari nodded. "Good. Keep it alive, without my name." She hesitated. "They're still calling you the man who silenced the state." He smiled softly. "Every story needs a myth. Let them keep it." Elsewhere, Jenkins and Alvarez stood outside the same diner from that night. No uniforms, now just two men with too much history between them. "You ever think about what he said?" Alvarez asked. "About good intentions rotting?" "Every day," Jenkins replied. "But maybe that's how we know they were good in the first place." He watched the street. People walking freely. A billboard announcing new healthcare reforms. "You ever notice?" he added. "Silence doesn't scare me anymore." Alvarez smiled. "That's because you learned how to fill it." Harper visited Kamari one last time before the verdict. They sat across from each other, a table between them, time running short. "I still don't know if you're a hero or a criminal," she admitted. "Neither," he said. "I'm a mirror. People see what they need to." She closed her notebook. "What do you see?" Kamari looked out the small window where sunlight fractured on the bars. "A city learning to breathe." The guard signaled the end of the visit. Harper stood. "If you ever get out," he smiled. "I already did." She didn't understand until she was halfway down the hallway, and the realization hit her like warmth after winter. He meant the truth. Once freed, it couldn't be contained again. Months later, at a small community clinic in South Atlanta, a nurse unpacked a shipment of newly approved gene therapy vials. On each box, beneath the government label, a faint embossed logo remained barely visible under the white sticker. "Holt Biogen." The nurse smiled and whispered, "Guess the ghost left us a gift." Outside, the city moved on, louder now, messier, but honest. And above it all, somewhere in the chorus of human noise, the silence that once ruled Atlanta finally ended.